It's possible to make realistic drapery using 3ds Max 9. It's an involved process and I'll take you through it. We'll start in the top viewport and sketch in a rectangle representing a single drapery object. I'll make this rectangle 8 feet by 8 feet. And I'll move it to the origin point. I'll create another rectangle using grid snap up here, occupying 2 grid squares. I'll turn off snap and turn off the grid so that this is easier to see. This will be a loop that will wrap around the top of the curtain around a curtain rod. So this is like a piece of fabric right now. I'll clone this over to the side a short distance and make a number of copies. I'll erase these so that I'm left with just 4. Then I'll select this rectangle and convert it into an editable spline. Attach all of the other rectangles to this single object and rename it drapery. I'll give it a different color. I'll make it white. So far, so good. Now, prior to applying the garment maker modifier, we need to break the drapery into different sub-objects. Right now, on the spline level, each rectangle is a separate sub-spline. I'd like to change that by selecting all the vertices and breaking them. Now we have a separate sub-spline for each segment. And I'd like to select the top segment here of the drapery. Let's divide that into 6 parts. You can only do that on the segment level. I'll make this say 6 and then click divide. So now we have additional vertices in here. But you'll see on the spline level that this is still a single spline object. So what I need to do again is select all of those vertices and break them. Now we're left with individual sub-splines here. Each one can represent a different seam within the curtain. And I'm going to show you how we can sew the seams together. Go to the top level and assign the garment maker modifier. This converts the splines into a mesh. Increase the density by clicking on the up arrow once and select Arranged Panels here. Then expand the modifier and you'll see that it has 3 different levels. Let's go into perspective, turn off the grid, and zoom in. Go to the panel level and select the main panel. Click on Front Center, and that will reorient the panel. Then select these loops over here and move them over the main curtain panel, and then move them up a short distance. There's an area right here that controls deformation of panels, and right now it's using preserved. Uncheck that and use curved and change the curvature. You'll see that the panels will roll. I want them to roll in the y-axis direction, and I want them to roll this way. I'll bring them close but not quite all the way into a loop. Now these loops will go around a curtain rod that we'll model separately. Right now we're focusing on knitting the garment together. I'll go into wireframe mode by pressing F3. And I'll go in the left viewport and zoom in. Here you can see that we need to move this over a little bit and down a little bit to get it into the right position. That looks good. Go back to perspective. Now deselect and zoom in a little closer. So we've done the overall panel work in deforming and positioning the panels. Now it's time to do the sewing work, as it were, and connect the seams. Go to the seams level, and here you'll be able to select individual seams. These are the independent subsplines that we went to all the trouble of creating within the editable spline. You see? So what I need to do now is select a pair of seams, like these two, and then I'll set the seam tolerance here at 1, and click Create Seam. And what we see here are called sewing springs, and they connect the seam together. Then I'll select these two, and I might need to arc rotate to see that better. It can be a little tricky in finding it. There it is. I'll hold down Control and click it. So I have two splines selected, and I'll click Create Seam. And there we have another one. So I just need to do this for all 4 loops. Again, that one's tricky to select. I'll arc rotate where I can see it and select both, and then create another seam. Over here, the same process. So I'm creating 2 seams for each loop. There we have it. The garment is complete. I'll go to the top level and zoom out.